So remember in my last video when I said that I don't like to talk about content that isn't in the game because it isn't in the game yet? Well, I decided to make an exception because at the end of the day, we're going to get a new skill and I really want to talk about it. So, yeah, this video is being recorded a few hours after my brief note on the new skill discussion thing. So, yeah, this is Monday still. I think it's Monday. Yeah, it's Monday. So at the end of the day, Jagex is going to make a couple of live streams to answer how they're going to pull the skills and everything. I'm not aware of that. I just read the blog post, and that's pretty much going to be it, right? All of the information should be there anyway. So yeah, keep that in mind. A second note that before going into the video, this video is going to be treated the same way that all of my other videos are when it comes to game discussion, be it the feature of skilling or invention in old school or achievement diaries. Essentially, I'm going to look at the game, I'm going to look at the skills, I'm going to see how they fit, the pros and cons of the essentially pitches that Jagex has given us, and I'm just going to try and work with it, right? Obviously, we don't have a lot of information, and this video is not going to be like, oh yeah, just giving a bunch of ideas. I'm not there to give a bunch of ideas. I'm here to judge the skills and their pitches and what I think about them, right? Don't let this video discourage you from picking something else, regardless of my opinion. So yeah, without further ado, let's actually start discussing the skills. Now I'm going to approach this the same way that the blog does, so sailing first, taming second, and shamanism third. So let's start by sailing. Now, I gotta be honest, sailing is my favorite skill to be pitched. I already wanted it back in 2015. We didn't get it. I actually wanted it in 2014, but it was an April Fool's joke, and that's how the skill pitch for 2015 actually was born. Unfortunately, didn't pass the poll. It's fine. It's back. It's reworked. It's something else now, completely different. And now we do have a mod team or a dev team that can actually take it on. Now, here's the thing. The main reason as why I like this skill is fairly simple. It's a method of transportation because the good thing about the Runescape map is that compared to other MMORPGs and to other games in general, the map feels cluttered. There's a lot of quests, there's a lot of things to do, so, the places feel important because you go through them so many times for a wide variety of reasons, right? But at the end of the day, there's only so many times that I can tolerate the rock. So any skill that essentially just allows you to go out and explore new areas, I enjoy. And sailing, being a method of transportation, is going to be a skill that allows you to do just that. Not just to actually sail the sea and do stuff at the sea, which is a thing that we haven't seen in RuneScape in over 20 years between both games, but also all of the activities and islands and everything that you can actually do in it, right? So in terms of potential, sailing is the skill out of the three that has the biggest potential. You can think almost of anything and it can involve sailing, right? Fishing at high sea, sailing, right? Fighting other players, fighting pirates, fighting a kraken, hunting a specific creature, trying to slay other, types of huge fish, right? Or like creatures, having to deal with weather and, from that to finding islands, finding ports, and trying to figure out mysteries, helping people in specific islands and everything. Like, ultimately, there's a lot you can do with sailing. The sky is the limit when it comes to this skill and, how the skill is actually, or what the skill is actually going to offer, right? And the rewards, the problem with talking about the rewards is exactly that. Ultimately, the rewards are connected to whatever you are doing. Obviously, if you are fishing and you are more skill oriented when it comes to sailing, the rewards are going to benefit skilling. If you're more combat, the rewards are going to be more combat. So the rewards are a bit hard to talk about because it depends a lot on what content you're actually doing at IC and what content we're going to have available. And Jagex has talked about even obstacle courses for your ship to like actually go through, which you'll also be able to customize your ship, which is actually something that I really enjoy, which is how mainly the skill progression is going to work, I feel, as you just unlock different parts of the ship that are good for different things, and that's what's going to allow you to go to specific areas and whatnot. Now, obviously, the problem with sailing is, or well, sailing is a problem and a half. The half problem is essentially that ultimately the skill will always feel incomplete. Given the amount of content that you can always introduce into the game, sailing will always leave you with that sense of we could do more with it, right? So regardless of how much content a skill has, when it's going to get pulled, it will always feel like it's missing something, that we have more potential with it and more potential with it, right? And obviously, nothing is stopping us from actually adding more content once the skill is in the game, but it will always feel like we can do more with it, right? Now, the actual problem of the skill comes with plain and simply the movement system. The movement system is going to be what either makes or breaks this skill. Like, this skill will either be the worst skill that you've ever experienced or the best one. And it entirely hinges how the movement system is going to work. Jagex has, said in the blog post that they pretend to maybe some keyboard inputs, maybe some interface or whatever. Personally, I would just keep it the most simple that we can. Make a grid system like RuneScape already has when you're on foot, right? And make it work that way. Maybe give players to POVs, so if you have or you're anchored in a place, you actually have your player and you actually move with your player around your own ship. If you don't have an anchor, it's just the ship POV and you're just moving around with your ship. You can see other players. Just like essentially it works already in the game when you're on foot, right? Any system that is not simple but effective is going to absolutely suck. It's going to lose players. Any system that is not responsive is going to lose players. So honestly, the movement system is going to be the key thing for sailing. If the movement system is good, the skill is good. If the movement system is bad, the skill is bad. It's going to be simple as that. And that is by far what I'm the most worried about this skill pitch. And it's by far what I really hope the Jagex really fucking tests when it comes to beta. I really hope they test different things and they do extended tests when it comes to the movement. Because again, and I cannot stress this enough, movement for sailing is going to be the most important part of the skill. Now, next up, we have taming, and taming is exactly the reason as to why I said that I was going to make this video like I made my other videos and not let my bias, shine too much. Mainly because when I first read taming, because we had this survey of like, oh yeah, rank like these Reddit skill pitches type thing, and taming was there. And I fucking hated it, like straight up. I just thought it was stupid. I just thought that, why should it even be in the game? It's useless. And honestly, after reading the, pitch for the skill in the blog, I'm not necessarily like convinced that it's the best skill for the game, but it's actually a good pitch, right? Compared to sailing, taming is almost the opposite, in the sense that taming will always feel like a complete skill, right? Regardless if you have 50 creatures or 200 for you to tame, it will always feel complete because it's going to be the skill that we can add more creatures to it, but the creatures that we already have, we already find them nice enough, right? So in contrast to sailing, it's almost the opposite in that regard. And in regard to the potential of the skill, there's not going to be a lot of like potential long term. It's going to get to a point where you're going to get all the creatures that you need, and that's pretty much it. But I think that's fine. Ultimately, this skill, and I really hope that it's going to be something like, POF in RuneScape 3, which is the reason as to why I have 120 farming to begin with. And because I think that, if the skill hinges mostly on you just getting creatures and then, actually feeding them and building habitats and, playing with them, doing activities with them, and just overall enjoying a system where you have a pet, that essentially means that XP is going to come almost entirely passively to the skill, right? Which is a good thing because it means that it's going to be a system that people will enjoy engaging with, and then the XP is almost just a bonus for engaging with that skill. And in terms of pets, I mean, people love them, right? So it's almost a no-brainer. And I don't mean just animals and IRL pets. I mean in-game pets as well. People love hunting and killing thousands of a boss for a KC just to get a specific boss pet that all it does is freaking just following you around. So if people are already willing to go through that just to get a pet, imagine when it comes to actually being able to take care of it and being able to feed it and all of that, and I think that overall taming is probably the skill that makes the most sense in the game, right? People love pets, people love taking care of them. Overall in the internet, people love animals. It just makes sense. The thing that I found a bit vague about taming is its rewards. Yes, pets can have and will have obviously, certain skills as you level them up, but ultimately I don't understand how those skills are going to impact the game, and I think that those skills will. And I think that that's the best part is that the rewards for taming when it comes to the skills that the pets have will mainly just be a bonus to having the skill in the first place. Because I think that even if you don't have any rewards from the pets themselves, people will still engage with the skill and enjoy the skill because it's just something that people overall enjoy doing. So yeah, overall timing is the most grounded, it's the most friendly to players. It's the skill that if it comes into the game, while people might not, find it the most favorite, I also find it hard for people to hate the skill. I really feel that this is going to be a skill that is not going to be like very hated if it comes into the game. This is probably the most inoffensive skill out of the three and the most like, or the least polarizing out of the three, I would say, right? The downsides of it, I would say that the main one is the fact that you already do have pets in the game, right? They get from skilling or mini games or bosses and whatnot, and those are really hard to get. So what will Jagex do? Will they adapt those pets so you can still like do activities with them and stuff like that, but they lack the skills that the taming pets are going to have, right? Because they're like a special category of pets that you can get, or are they just going to be considered followers and then you do have the taming like pets? And if that's the case, can you have two pets following you at the same time, one being a follower and another being, an actual taming pet? And, will that confuse players too much, right? So, yeah, there's definitely questions when it comes to this, but I would say that if that's the biggest problem that the skill has, it bodes really well for the skill, right? So I would say the timing is the least controversial and probably the highest chances of actually making it through. I really like sailing, but at the end of the day, a lot of casual players, they're not gonna care about the game too much, so they're gonna see the thing that they enjoy the most, and taming seems to be a pretty popular choice, at least as I'm concerned right now. And thirdly, we get to shamanism, and oh boy. Good thing I left this skill for last because I have a lot to say about it. First of all, I just want to grab the augmentation part, mainly because I just want to talk about it before I actually talk about the skill. Augmentation to me, I already talked about it in my invention video, and I just don't think it's a good idea for old school. I think that augmentation has the problem that I like to call the Yumi problem. Essentially, Yumi is a League of Legends champion that is an enchanter, and she attaches herself to people and becomes untargetable and heals people that she's attached to. Now, the problem with Yumi not having any counterplay compared to other champions is the fact that she will always be in a perpetual state of either being useless or overpowered, that entirely depend on the raw stats of the champion on how much she can heal, right? She can heal enough, she's overpowered, she can't heal enough, she's useless, right? Essentially, augmentation is Yumi in Runescape, right? At least for old school. Old school simply does not have the depthness to have augmentation right now. Maybe in 5, 10 years we'll have, and then we can talk about augmentation. Right now, augmentation, if it comes into old school, it will either be due to the lack of depthness that a lot of the aspects of the game have, it will either be useless or overpowered, right? So I'm going to assume that shamanism didn't even include like the augmentation part thing, right? Let's just assume that it didn't have, right? For the benefit of the skill, right? So shamanism does have another slight issue that I kind of forgot to talk about, which is shamanism displays a problem the community has, which is the community thinks they want to care about the health of the game, when in reality, if it affects them, they don't. And ultimately, again, and going back to my invention video, essentially, you should never design a skill based on fixing problems in the game. A skill should always be first and foremost fun, and then, okay, what we're going to do with the skill, are we going to train it and everything, and only then, after all of that is done, if possible, do you actually try and, fix problems with the game through the skill. Only then, right? So now that those things are out of the way, essentially, now let's actually talk about the skill. And the skill itself was almost the opposite of taming in the sense of when I read, like before reading the pitch, I actually thought that, yeah, okay, this can be interesting. And then I read the pitch and I was honestly kind of disappointed. And I was disappointed mainly because After reading some comments, which haven't been many because it's Monday, but after reading some comments, one thing that I realized is that a lot of people are saying that this is the skill that feels the most like old school RuneScape, and I can see that. Essentially, compared to other skills, this skill you just literally go around, you gather resources from specific nodes, you make rituals, and you gain XP. But what I need to ask is, do we want skills that feel like old school? Essentially, after playing RuneScape 3, and I experienced archaeology, I experienced invention, right? I experienced these two skills particularly, which they might not be amongst the favorites of people, but if you ask people in RuneScape 3 what their favorite skills are, I can 100% guarantee you these two skills will rank highly, very consistently, right? And that's because the skills themselves, a lot of the times, feel like you're not even training a skill. Yes, you are training a skill, but the skill involves so much more, right? So when it comes to training a skill, I really wish that old school players would be a bit more ambitious over what a skill can entail and what a skill can actually offer you and the experiences that the skill can offer you, right? Because going around Gillenor, gathering stuff from specific nodes, and then making rituals, that just sounds like fire making with extra steps. That sounds like fire making on an Iron Man that can only cut logs, right? Is that fun to train the skill? Like, ask yourself this: do you really want to engage with that? Because, particularly, I don't find it too fun as a skill as to engage, right? So, that is, I think, the biggest problem that I have with the skill. Now, the skill does have also the spirit world that was just thrown randomly in the skill pitch, and I didn't even understand too much why. And that's because eventually, look, shamanism feels like Jagex had a bunch of small ideas that they threw together to, a stew when they're trying to put them together, right? Shamanism doesn't feel very cohesive or interesting. But that's about to change, because I'm about to actually make it interesting, right? So here's the thing. Instead of gathering specific resources from special nodes that the skill will create, how about we do this, right? Let's start with the spirit world. Let's make that the focal point of our skill, right? Essentially, spiritualism or shamanism, let's call it spiritualism for now, right? It's about the spirit world, right? And the spirit world, you get resources, specific resources, right? So you have some, doors for the spirit world, and you have semi-randomly generated areas of the game, like a semi-randomly generated Varrock and stuff like that, right? You can treat it like dungeons from the engineering. You get resources, and you bring those resources out of that dungeon. And then you can combine those resources with stuff that you find around the game that you already find around the game, right? Like berries and, maybe a bucket or just random things. Obviously, for main accounts, you would just buy them off the GE, but I mean, you already have to go to the spirit world to get those other resources, so it's not like you can just buy the skill, right? And then you use those things to perform rituals. Rituals that you learn from spirits in the spirit world that like essentially certain areas of Gillenor have these areas, the spirit world areas that never change, right? They're hubs that you can go into, right? You can perform certain rituals and stuff like that. And as you progress through the skill, they will teach you new, rituals and new techniques and stuff like that, and even enhancing your already techniques, right? And then, most of the XP, instead of coming from just gathering from nodes and making rituals, the XP comes from the exploration of the spirit world and the resources that you gather from it, and then making rituals and using those rituals, right? I think that a skill that provides XP when you actually engage with it is far more interesting to me than a skill that is simply, oh yeah, you just gather stuff, you make rituals, and that's how you gain XP, right? Make people actually want to engage with this skill to make it interesting. And shamanism does have that power. I mean, think about it. The spiritual world, that's how you learn rituals, that's how you get resources for your rituals and stuff like that. And you can combine that with already existing areas in Gillenor that are a bit more, not as used, right? And then you can make rituals with temporary boosts. Temporary temporary boost, and when I was reading the blog post, all of them are from RuneScape 3, I'm pretty sure. Like, I've used them in RuneScape 3, all of them, so just throwing that out there. But regardless, temporary boosts nonetheless, right, that you can just use and that you get XP from when using and engaging with them, right? This way, the skill would feel far more cohesive. You have a central idea, which is the spirit world. You can expand it later on with more rituals, with more resources, with more areas of the spirit world that have, maybe some enemies or something like that provide other extra rewards that aren't just the rewards or the materials to make rituals, right, or rituals boost themselves, right? You have a cohesive idea that is grounded, that has room for expansion, right? That actually feels like a proper skill that is fun to engage with. Because my problem right now with shamanism isn't even the rewards themselves. I think that being able to make rituals everywhere is a cool idea. Getting temporary boosts from them is an interesting idea, although I'm a bit worried at which types of boosts we're actually going to get. But it's an interesting idea because you will have the trade-off between, hey, I can do this and, sacrifice parts of my inventory to carry the items with me to make the rituals, or I just don't do it. There's essentially a trade-off there, so rituals aren't completely overpowered, right? Rituals would be thralls in that aspect, where like, yes, you can bring thralls for extra DPS, but do you want to sacrifice your offhand? Maybe if you're not that good at the game, you might not want to bring thralls to begin with, right? Rituals would essentially be sort of the same thing. So ultimately I think that if the skill was you go to the spiritual world, you have semi randomly generated areas, they get the resources that then you bring to Gillenor, and then you combine those resources with resources that you gather around Gillenor to then combine them to make rituals that you learn from the spirit world that give you temporary boosts. That is a cohesive skill, it's grounded, it has room for improvement, you can do more stuff with it, and it sounds interesting because a spirit world in Gillenor, that actually does sound really interesting, and it's an idea that Jagex could actually really play with when it comes to the skill. So yeah, if the skill was that and it was pitched as that, honestly, I would love it. And on that note, again, and to echo what I already said, maybe when it comes to new skills, and especially when it comes to this new RuneScape skill, this is not 2006 anymore. The team also isn't composed of 8 or 7 JMOs like it was in 2014/15, right? There's so many people working at Jagex nowadays. They have the experience of not just old school and making old school, but also RuneScape 3. They have the experience of making content and of understanding what players have interacted with. So maybe when it comes to us and when it comes to talking about the skills, maybe we should be a bit more ambitious from what we want from a skill. Because yes, we could have Firemaking 2.0, or we could genuinely have something that is really interesting to engage with, something that also gives interesting rewards, and something that has even more potential to grow in the future, right? Yes, it doesn't quote unquote feel like old school RuneScape, but in my opinion, it feels much better than that. But yeah, that's what I think about the skills, at least the proposals. Again, it's Monday, so Jagex hasn't exactly expanded much on it. The polls are going to open on 4th of April, if I'm not mistaken, so be sure to vote. And look, I already said that I'm biased for sailing, but regardless of what skill you choose, just make sure that you are engaged with it and make sure that, honestly, you voice your feedback to Jagex and you provide them with the best experience that the players can have. And don't forget, we're going to get a new skill, so really we should strive to make it fun above everything. Because a skill that is fun to engage not only means that players are going to enjoy it, but it also means that in the future we might get more content and skills that are also fun to engage with.